any problems this evening. On this slide here, hopefully you've had an opportunity to read over the information here to make sure your microphones are muted at this time so that the rest of us don't hear your conversations. Also, this program this evening is being recorded. I'm Jennifer Fishburn, and I am the Extension Educator for Horticulture. Is that vibrating back for anyone else? Feedback? Okay. I'm the Horticulture Educator here with the University of Illinois Extension, and I cover the Logan, Menard, and Sangamon counties. This evening I'm joined by Steve Petrelli, a Master Gardener volunteer and a local Springfield, Illinois beekeeper, and he will be helping me at the end to field questions. We'll take questions at the end of this evening's presentation. You should have received an email, or if you're at a site, you should receive some handouts this evening. One is a reference list, and the other is a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Tonight's presentation will cover just the surface of understanding beekeeping. So it's my hope that if you're still interested in beekeeping as a hobby after this evening, that you'll take an opportunity of educational opportunities that will be mentioned later in the program. A little bit of a disclaimer for this evening. When I say the word bees, I'm referring to honeybees. So I may not always just say the whole honeybee, but that is what I'm referring to. Also, there are several ways to do things in beekeeping and different types of equipment that I will show you, but I will not be able to show you every style of beekeeping and every way that there is to do something. So bear that in mind as we go through the presentation this evening. So the first question that you may have is, why should I keep bees, or why might someone want to keep bees? And you can see listed here we have several reasons for doing so. But most importantly, honeybees are a valuable pollinator for many of our food crops, including apples and almond crops. Bees are not our only pollinator, but they are one of our valuable pollinators. Honeybees in North America belong to a single species, but there are several races that exist within that species. Keep in mind that honeybees are not native to North America. Italian bees are the most popular among beekeepers. For most people, beekeeping is considered a hobby. Once you get past the fear of being stung, it can actually be an enjoyable hobby that some people actually find to be a stress reducer. For anyone who owns agriculturally zoned property in Illinois, you'll find it of interest that bees are considered livestock, and they can help you meet the agricultural qualifications for tax purposes. Beekeeping can be a source of income, but if you only have a few hives, don't expect to get rich selling honey and bee products. Some beekeepers will rent out their hives for pollination services. Many beekeepers enjoy being able to harvest their own honey, beeswax, pollen, and propolis. Now, the one term that you may be questioning right now is propolis, and that's a sap or resinous material that the bees collect from trees or plants, and the bees add their enzymes to it. What they do with propolis is it's used to strengthen and sanitize and disinfect the colony. It's also called bee glue. In addition to liquid honey, or what we call extracted honey, there are many forms of honey, such as comb honey, cut comb honey, chunk honey, and creamed honey. Why you might not want to keep bees? Most people will have an allergic reaction to a bee sting, which would be swelling or itching in the area of the bee sting. However, if someone has trouble breathing, That is not a normal reaction to a bee sting, so they might not want to consider keeping bees. Also bear in mind that with the beekeeping, if you have trouble lifting over 40 pounds, this may not be suited for you, or you may need to find someone who would be willing to do that. A full medium honey super can weigh up to 40 pounds. Another reason not to keep bees would be if your local ordinance does not allow beekeeping, and that would be something that you would find out with your local municipality, township, or county. You live in an urban setting, we highly recommend that you talk to your neighbors before you start beekeeping. Urban beekeeping is possible, and in this photo you see a picture of 4 hives that are in a small backyard in Springfield, Illinois. So it is possible. But again, check your local ordinances. Also check your ordinances if there's any setbacks from property lines. Other things to consider would be to educate your neighbors. Inform them of the valuable pollinating services that bees provide, particularly if they have flowers or vegetable gardens or fruit trees. That bees are usually not aggressive unless they're threatened. So people waving their arms, that's a threat to the bees. A honeybee does not want to sting you, because when it stings you, it will die. If you rent property, make sure you get your landlord's permission. And lastly, keep only gentle bees. On the previous session, someone had asked, what are gentle bees? You'll know what gentle bees versus aggressive bees are. Gentle bees are ones that when you usually work the hive and you take your time, they aren't going to get real excited on most days. What would be a good location for an urban bee site? Hives should not be placed in your front yard or what is considered the street side of your property, or where there might be sidewalks that people will be frequently walking. By keeping it in your backyard, or what most of us would consider our backyard, it keeps it out of sight and out of mind. Also make sure that you provide a water source for your bees to keep them from visiting the neighbor's swimming pool. And a water source for bees consists of a pan, maybe a shallow pan that'll hold several inches of water, but placing rocks in that water so that the bees have a landing pad and they can sip the water. If they land in the water, they may drown. Another thing to mention on that is to place a barrier, a flight obstacle in front of your hive, so that the bees will move their flight pattern upward instead of what we would consider level with people. Do your homework. Tonight's session is just the beginning. There is lots and lots of information out there about beekeeping, and I encourage you to learn more. It takes a lot of learning to be a successful beekeeper. Also, beekeeping is an investment of your time and your money. I encourage you to attend bee classes. Tonight's a good start, but there are many counties across the state of Illinois that the local beekeeping organizations offer all-day trainings or several night sessions of classes. You also might want to consider getting in touch with a local beekeeping club. There you'll find people that will be willing to mentor you and provide advice for your new adventure. The Illinois State Beekeepers Association website.
I put it on my speakerphone and I turn it off.
Whoever just talked, you need to put your phone on mute, please. The Illinois State Beekeepers Association website has a listing of all upcoming classes offered by their affiliated clubs. And they also have some great links on resource handouts that you can get off the internet. Internet research is another great tool, but I encourage you to visit educational websites or state beekeeping association websites. These are listed in your reference handout. Some universities, such as Pennsylvania State, offer online courses. Bear in mind, those do usually cost. On this website, we have links, which are also on your handout, to the Illinois State Beekeepers Association. And through their website, they have a listing of all of their affiliates' beekeeping classes. I would encourage you to take a look at this site. If you're interested in more education, do so right away, because there are several classes that are coming up fairly quickly. Plan before you begin. Education and planning are going to be one of the keys to a successful beekeeping adventure. Location is important. You need to find out if you have a suitable location to place your beehive. It should be located, again, near a water source or providing them a type of water source, and also in a location that will provide them with a variety of food sources, both for pollen and nectar. These sources of pollen and nectar should be available from spring to fall. So you want to have an abundance of blooming plants during all seasons and a diversity of plant material. Also try to limit pesticide usage. Bear in mind that all these food sources do not have to be in your yard or on your property, but should be within a short distance if possible. Bees readily fly 2 miles, but are known to fly up to 5 miles. And this is in a radius in either direction of their hive. Their preference is going to be to take shorter trips. The shorter the flight, the more nectar and pollen they can collect, and the longer that their wings will last. Always purchase new equipment. So look at the cost of starting up 1 or 2 hives. Unless you're getting equipment from your best trusted friend ever, we really recommend that you try not to buy used equipment, because you don't necessarily know what the history of that equipment is. And also make sure, if you do buy used equipment, that it's disease and pest free. As an estimate, if you're just starting 1 hive, including the hive itself, which I'll show you in a moment, the veil, the smoker, the tools, and the bees, you're looking at around $400 as an estimate to start that hive. Now I want to talk just a little bit about who will be in that beehive. There is 1 queen per beehive. She is the only one who will lay eggs in the hive. And that is her sole purpose, is to lay those eggs. She can produce 1,000 to 1,500 eggs per day. And this amount varies based on many factors, including the age of the queen, the health and size of the hive, and the available food sources, and the time of the year. The queen will live up 2 to 4 years, and you will know when she's getting older, she will lay fewer eggs. She mates at age 2 weeks. She takes several succession mating flights, and she can mate with up to 20 drones. During those succession flights, that'll be the only time that she'll leave the hive. The worker bees. These are our infertile female bees, and the majority of the hive is made up of worker bees. They perform all the functions of the hive, from feeding the queen, feeding the brood, cleaning and defending the hive, and foraging for food. There are 3 types of worker bees in the colony. They include the nurse bees, the house or guard bees, and the forage bees. They are very social animals in that a house bee can communicate to a forage bee the resources needed for that hive, whether it be protein, carbohydrates, propolis, or water. The drones. These are the males. There's usually only about 1,000 males per hive. They do live longer than the worker bees because they don't do any of the work. Their only function is to mate with a queen from another hive. If they do mate, they do end up dying. But in the fall, all the drones are ejected from the hive. Bee stings. For most beekeepers, it's not a matter of if you're going to be stung, but when you're going to be stung. Knock on wood, I have kept bees for a year, and now that I say that, I'll probably get stung, but I haven't gotten stung yet. But our dog has, because she moved too fast around the hive. Keep in mind that bee stinging is a defense mechanism. They are defending their hive, defending their queen, or defending their space. To avoid being stung, you want to work slowly around them, avoid fast movements, and avoid working the hive on cloudy or cold days. A bee does not want to sting you because if she does, she will die because it pulls out, the stinger will pull out the insides. Always make sure when you're working the hive that you're wearing light colored clothing in the bee area. Hence, that's why you'll see the jackets that are made for working with beehives are white. If you are stung, simply scrape the stinger away with a fingernail or sharp edge. Don't squeeze the venom sac because that'll pour more venom into you. And do keep in mind that swelling can be what's considered a normal reaction. A little bit more on hive location. Again, make sure you have an abundant source of nectar and pollen. Face your hive south or southeast so it's getting the most sun possible. It's getting the rise of the sun in the morning and the fall in the evening. Avoid placing the hive in an open field. If possible, make sure that you have a windbreak nearby. You'll also either want a slight slope to the ground or the ability to make the front of the hive lower than the back of the hive. The reason for doing this is you want that slope to be downward, what I would consider downward, so that water doesn't get into the hive. Again, if you can have a good water source within 1/4 of a mile, that's a good idea. Keep the hive away from children frequently play or where pets may frequent. Also, if you're placing your hive where fields might be sprayed, you'll want to develop a relationship with that farm owner or person tending that property and ask them if they can notify you ahead of time of them spraying so that you can confine the bees to the hive for that day. Whether you're going to keep bees or not, we all have a responsibility for honeybees and our native bees to provide food sources for them. It's called gardening for bees and pollinators. What we can do in our own yards is plant blooming plants into groupings or beds. This way the bees don't have to visit many flowers. They can visit many flowers in one location and they don't have to travel greater distances. Plant for bloom succession. Again, think from spring through fall, something blooming all the time that the bees and the other pollinators will frequent for pollen and nectar sources. This could include a variety of annual plants, perennial plants, vegetables, herbs, trees, and shrubs. If possible, limit pesticide usage, especially during the day when your pollinators are the most active. And be sure to read the chemical label for toxicity to bees and other pollinators. There are many, many sources of nectar. This is a small sampling. On your handout, there's a reference called Gardening for Honeybees from Indiana Department of Natural Resources. That's a great tool for looking up further nectar and pollen sources. If you look at the list of the spring nectar sources, you will see what we call a lot of weeds. Weeds are simply a plant that is out of its place. But some of these are plants that bees actually like. They're a good nectar source, such as clover, dandelions, henbit. Those are all undesirables in our lawn, but very desirable to the bees. Black locust is also another good spring nectar source. In the summer, we see many herb plants that are good nectar sources. And in the fall, we've got goldenrod and asters and spider flower listed. I will also mention that for our next slide, that pollen and willow are good pollen sources. Here's a list of some of the pollen sources. And pollen sources can also be nectar sources as well. Not necessarily two different plants, but they can be one and the same. Here's a short list again of some spring pollen sources such as maple trees and strawberries, to summer sources of chives and cucumbers. And fall, we have asters and goldenrod again. The next few slides, I will show you some of the tools of the trade. Again, these are not all the possible tools. They're not all the only things that you might want to buy. It's just a few tools to get you started. In these pictures, you'll see products that I actually purchased last year in starting my own beef hive. Here we have in the top picture a veil. That'll be necessary to cover your eyes. It'll help you from getting stung in your eyes. While you may get stung, you do not want to get stung in the eyes. Bee gloves, which are leather gloves with a netting that goes up to about your elbow. What we call hive tool and a J hive tool. Those are going to be used for helping to pry the hive open and work with the frames. You have a smoker in the bottom right-hand corner with a shield. This smoker has a shield in front of it, which will help you from getting burned on the can. How you use the smoker is in the left picture on the bottom. You will light cardboard or another source. And place that into the smoker. Then you'll use the billows to get the smoke to come out. A smoker is used to calm the bees while you're working in the hives. You'll want a spray bottle for sugar water, a quart jar for your sugar syrup to feed your bees in the spring, a propane torch to light your fuel source for your smoker, and a frame for a candy board. This is an example of a long straw hive. It's the most common hive used by beekeepers, but again, not the only type of hive. This is a hive that has hanging and movable frames, which I'll show you in the next picture of the frames. What you see here is on the bottom, there's two concrete blocks, but you could use another type of structure to raise the hive up off the ground. When you raise it off the ground, you're letting air movement go under the hive and prevent moisture buildup in the bottom of the hive. Next, then, you'll have a bottom board on top of which you'll have two brood boxes or deep hive bodies. and each of those hive bodies will have 10 frames. On top of that, if you're using a queen excluder, it's placed on top of the deep hive body, and in between that and the honey supers. Next, you'll have anywhere, most people will put 2 honey supers, which are also called medium supers or Illinois supers, on top of that, and those will have 10 frames in each of those boxes as well. A queen excluder is placed in the front of the hive to limit the entrance size of hole that the bees can come in and, excuse me, did I say that right? Entrance reducer is what's placed in the front of the hive so that you reduce the size of the opening during certain times of the year. Surrounding the hive is a orange ratchet strap. You don't have to have an orange one, but the ratchet strap helps hold the hive together in case that you might have investigative wildlife near the hive. The next consideration is obtaining a bee colony. You have several choices here. The most common for new beekeepers and probably the best option is to purchase a package of bees. These will come in 2, 3, or 5-pound packages. Of these, most common is 3-pound package. A package is many times ordered as early as November or December of the previous year and arrives generally around April for Central Illinois. Another option is a nucleus colony, and this is something that would be purchased locally from another beekeeper. It's a small hive, or what you're actually purchasing is 3 to 5 frames and a queen, and that's usually available in May or June. Buying an established hive is not recommended for new beekeepers, but if you do get one and you're crossing county lines, it does have to be inspected and disease-free. Capturing a swarm is another option, but availability is unpredictable. A bee package for Central Illinois will arrive generally in early to mid-April, earlier for Southern Illinois, and later for Northern Illinois. When you get your bee package, you want to make sure that your hive is ready to go and get the bees in there as quickly as possible. What you're purchasing with a bee package is worker bees, getting a can of sugar that's keeping them alive while they're being transported to you, and then a queen who's in her own little cage there that you see her in the bottom right. This is one way to install a package in the spring. These pictures are numbered. In picture number 1, you'll see spraying a frame. You'll want to spray your frames with sugar water. This is can be a 1-to-1 solution, 1 part water to 1 part sugar, and that's boiled and then cooled in the bottle. Bees will lick the sugar off of these frames, and that helps them accept the hive, accept the frames, and start to build wax in the hive. In picture number 2, we see the bottom board and a hive body, deep hive body on top of the concrete blocks with the frames in it, ready to accept the new bees. In picture 3, we're opening the box and taking out the sugar syrup can and removing the queen. Picture 6 shows installing the queen into the box. She's installed initially still in her cage. In picture 4, we're spraying the bees so that they'll be a little less active, so that when we get to picture 5, we're going to shake those bees gently into the box in which we already have the queen. This is jumping to the end of the season here, but I show this picture because it talks about overwintering bees, which is what we're doing right now. You want to make sure that your colonies have ample food going into the winter. This is essential. The colony needs at least 60 pounds of honey to overwinter. If it doesn't have, they don't have enough of their own honey, you will have to feed them. The picture on the right is showing a candy board. It's hardened sugar that's placed on top of the hive that the bees can get to. Winter starvation is probably the most common cause of death for a bee population. Okay, the next two slides I'm going to cover briefly because I don't want to scare anyone, but just like humans, we get colds, we get the flu. Bees also can suffer more so from parasitic problems and diseases. So it's just something that you need to be aware of. I think the best advice I got is that a new beekeeper should monitor their hives. Be looking at your hives frequently so that you know what your healthy hive looks like, so you'll know if it begins to have any problems. The other thing a good beekeeper a new beekeeper can do is do what we call integrated pest management, where you're monitoring for bee diseases or pests. The picture that you see here on this screen is of a small hive beetle trap. In that trap, you'll see vegetable oil, and inside of that, you'll see a little black speck, and that's a small hive beetle. So this is one way that we can monitor our hives to see if we have pests present. A few of the problems that we've mentioned here are Varroa destructor mite. This is the biggest concern for beekeepers. What this mite will do is actually attach to the outside of the bee's body. When the worker bee is working on a brood cell, the mite will jump off. It'll get into the brood cell, lay eggs on the larva. The mite can actually kill the larva or reduce its strength. And the mite that it had attached to the bee can actually weaken that bee's immune system. Tracheal mite, as it says, is a mite that gets into the bee's trachea. Here's a list of a couple diseases that do affect the brood. American foul brood is rare in Illinois, but when it occurs, it's detrimental to a hive. American foul brood, if it gets in a hive, the only control that you have is to destroy the bees and the hive. European foul brood does occur in Illinois, but is less severe in that the cure is nutrition, requeening a hive, and possibly replacing affected brood frames. Sac brood and chalk brood are diseases that can be cured with nutrition and requeening. Another thing to remember here is that a beekeeper should develop a working relationship with their local state apiary inspector, and if they do suspect diseases, they can contact their inspector for assistance. Which leads us to the next slide here. In Illinois, beekeepers are required to register their hives within 10 days. This is free, and it can be simply done by visiting the Illinois Department of Agriculture's Illinois Bees and Apiaries Program website and downloading a form, filling it out, and sending it in. Also on this website, you can find the Illinois Bees and Apiary Acts and Rules. So that might be something you'd want to read ahead of time. I was not able to get the 2014 Illinois beekeeping numbers, as I don't think they've yet been posted. I thought it very interesting that in Illinois in 2013, there were almost 700 new beekeepers. That's great news for our honeybee population and a great news for our crops that need pollinated. In 2013, there were 2,519 beekeepers in Illinois, keeping 24,000 colonies. And the majority of those beekeepers, 1,765 of those, had 1 to 5 colonies, so they were considered hobby beekeepers. Again, I cannot stress the importance of doing the best that you can to educate yourself before you get started in beekeeping. Here I've listed a couple of websites which are also listed on your reference handout. Beekeeping Basics in Penn State. They have a PDF. I think it was about 100 pages long. It's free for you to download on the Beekeeping Basics. Illinois State University has a beekeeping club, and they have some very nice handouts on their website. Ohio State Beekeepers Association. They have approximately 30 different videos which you can download and watch on your own personal computer. And then the Ohio State University Bee Lab has some great information as well. And as mentioned before, Penn State has an online bee course that you can register for. A couple other resources that aren't listed as EDU websites but are great tools to look at is the American Bee Journal and Bee Culture Magazine. I want to point out in this picture here, really doesn't have anything to do with either of the resources, but this is an example of sculpted wax that someone has entered in Illinois State Fair. And Steve tells me this wasn't the first century, but it's a pretty outstanding bee wax sculpture nonetheless. A couple of interesting facts make you appreciate the work that our honeybees do. One honeybee worker makes only 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in her lifetime. So it takes honeybees flying a total accumulation of 55,000 miles to bring in enough nectar to make 1 pound of honey. And if honeybees visit approximately 2 million flowers, they can make 1 pound of honey. So makes you appreciate those little ladies, I should say, just a little bit more. Again, today's presentation is a little bit of a teaser on what it might take to get into beekeeping. Obviously, there's a lot more information that you're going to need to know before you get started. Here's my contact information if after today's session you have more questions. And we'll also let you know that if you want to listen to this again or others to this session, this is being recorded and will be posted to the YouTube website for the University of Extension Horticulture. At this time, if you would like to post any questions into the chat box or ask any questions, we will be happy to answer those.
We've got one question. So my name's Steve Petrilli. I'm the master gardener volunteer that's beekeeper here in Springfield as well. I see there's one question in there at the beginning, and that's how would they test for diseases and by whom? As a beekeeper, until you gain experience, you want to turn to a more experienced beekeeper, or even better yet, turn to your local apiary inspector if you think you have a disease in your hive. The apiary inspector will check your hive out at no charge, and if that inspector, and I was about to say he, we have plenty of female apiary inspectors as well as as male, and you'll see their names on the Department of Agriculture website. If they think you've got a disease and it warrants it, they will take a sample and send it in for analysis. Again, no charge to you as a beekeeper.
The next question is, what is the purpose of registering your hive? Well, number one, it is required by Illinois law that you register your hive. And again, that is a free service. And after you've registered, each year they will send you a form to re-register your hives and ask if there's any changes in number of hives that you have or location. One of the reasons for doing this is so that one of the bee inspectors or the inspector for your area can come out and look at your hive, and they at that time will look for disease or insect problems. This is to help manage bee populations in Illinois and make sure that we don't have any catastrophic events with our bees and building up, getting a disease that shouldn't be here.
And I'd like to add something to that. Sometimes we don't really register our hives. We register ourselves as beekeepers, and the beekeeper gets a number. So you'll get a unique number that will be assigned to you, and no matter how many hives you have or where they're located within the state of Illinois, you should put that number on the front and back of your hive, at least on the back. And so if somebody sees your hive, because we do have a lot of diligent pesticide applicators, and if they're driving through an area and if they see your hive, they may end up calling the Department of Agriculture to let them know that they will be spraying in the area, and they'll pass the word on to you. And the other thing is that to register on Drift Watch, which also makes your hive locations available to pesticide applicators.
Next question we have is, there federal or state programs to assist people in starting a basic hive? Not that I am aware of, but again, that's another reason to join a local beekeeping association. It could be possible that they have a means in which to help you or may have further suggestions on how to do that. Where do you suggest purchasing your hive is the next question with that. University of Illinois Extension, we cannot recommend business locations, although I will tell you that Dedant is a Illinois-based company. You can mail order from them. They have a website as well. They have a catalog, and it's a reputable company. Another, I did not mention that earlier, for purchasing bee packages. That can be done, again, through various locations, but there are some farm and home stores in the state of Illinois that carry packaged bees as well as bee equipment. Another thing I might suggest is you contact your local bee organization and see if they have suggestions for where they like to purchase equipment, because there are many reputable mail order companies throughout the United States. Yeah. The next question, do you have an update on the colony collapse?
As far as colony collapse, there's really not a disease or anything called colony collapse. It's a term that's being given to the disappearance and death of bees. Here in Illinois, when we're asked, at least beekeepers, we really don't see what people are referring to as colony collapse. We will have beehives and bee colonies that die for specific reasons, such as lack of food or disease or virus. But the term where colony collapse originated really started out on the West Coast. Majority of the large beekeepers are going to be west of the Mississippi. The term is most of the beekeepers are east of the Mississippi. The majority of all the bees are up to the west. But with pollinator services, you have thousands of hives, millions and billions of bees that are being shipped from all across the United States. They started in February out in California pollinating the almond crops. and they'll go from one specialty crop to the next. And it's really the belief, it's stress being put on the bees, constantly being moved from one place to the next, over a matter of weeks. But when they're in one place, it's essentially a monoculture. In a almond orchard, that's all they get is almond pollen for 2 or 4 weeks or however long they're in there. And, how good would your health be if the only thing you had to eat every day was oatmeal and nothing else? The orchard growers and the beekeepers, the commercial beekeepers, are starting to realize that, and they're starting to make some progress and starting to plant buffer strips and some other crops in amongst the orchards to give the bees a variety of nutrition while they're pollinating.
Is it okay to keep bees in close proximity to my chickens and rabbits? I think that would be fine. Steve can share a little story here about one of our local beekeepers and his chickens. As long as the rabbits, you might keep a little further away, because if they're in a cage, they won't have an opportunity to get away from the bee if it comes in their cage. But for chickens that are roaming, they'll learn to stay away.
Yes, we have one commercial beekeeper that, not commercial beekeeper, a beekeeper who has probably about 20 hives in his yard. He's also got a couple of chicken coops, and he's a farmer. He's probably got 60 or 70 chickens. And the way he termed it to me, he says the bees and the chickens have come to an agreement, and neither one bothers the other. So they learn real quick.
But Steve, you were mentioning the other day that dragonflies are a predator of bees.
Yes. Yeah, we have several natural predators here in Illinois. Dragonflies are one, so if you're living near bodies of water or terrain where dragonflies are present, don't be surprised if you don't see dragonflies bombing your hives. Purple martins are also natural predators, as are hornets and yellow jackets, as far as the winged kind, and we have several other predators. The most notable one is a skunk, and what they like to do is they'll go up to a hive at night and start scratching on it, and as the bees come out to investigate, the skunk will then just start eating the bees, and the skunk will just sit there and chew them up until it gets all the juices out of the bee and then spit them out in a wad. So that's how you tell that a skunk has been bothering your hive. One, your hive may be a little touchy when you come to it in the morning, because they're a little defensive. They've been disturbed during the night. Your hive has probably got scratches on it, and you'll see little wads. It looks like wads of chewing tobacco on the ground, and that's a good indication that you've got a predator, namely a skunk, preying on your bees.
Another question was, how much does a 3-pound package cost? I can tell you last year I paid $85 for my package, but I think that was a 2-pound package. So it could be a little bit more than that. It also depends on your source, and you might want to check with a local beekeeping club. If you join, sometimes they order multiple packages to sell to their members.
I've seen some recent prices on 3-pound packages. They're around $110, which is a good price. They may be more. Here in central Illinois, we go mainly with 2-pound packages. They're a little bit more affordable, and there's not a whole lot of difference. Earlier in the year, it'll be 2-pound packages, and then later in the year, when you get packages, the suppliers seem to 3-pound packages. Of course, you can get a 3-pound package now, in the first shipment if you want it, but most beekeepers in our local association get the 2-pound packages.
The next question is, do you know of any resources for information for beginning beekeepers, books to recommend, or other services? Again, if you look at the handout that was provided for you, I've listed several very good bee reference websites. For books, you'll also see listed First Lessons in Beekeeping, and that is from Dedant Publishing. I'm not sure where else you can get that, but that can be ordered from the Dedant company.
Right. Amazon.com.
Amazon.
Yes.
So there are other good resources out there. That happens to be the book that we use for our beekeeping classes here that we offer at our office. Are there any other questions?
If somebody asks a question that we didn't answer, please, it may have rolled off the screen. We may not have caught it. Feel free to either type in or speak up. Right?
Kari, do you have anything to add?
I was going to say, if anybody is calling in on a phone and would like to ask a question and you're muted, the way to unmute your phone is *6, and you can answer or ask your question. Otherwise, we will be posting these up to our YouTube channel, hopefully in fairly short order.
Well, I want to thank you all for your participation this evening, and hope that you've enjoyed the presentation. Whether or not you're going to catch bees or not, you will hopefully have a better appreciation for the honeybees that visit your garden. We have one more question here. Anyone use a top bar hive?
There are people that use top bar hive in Illinois and in central Illinois. I am not familiar with them. Not too many people are. Usually a person that has a top bar hive usually also has a standard Langstroth hive as well. It's just a different method of beekeeping.
The next question is, what is a candy board? I've made 5 of those this year, so I think I'm getting pretty good at answering that question. My hive going into the fall did not have a good enough reserve of honey to keep the bees through the winter. So what I've been doing about every other week is putting a candy board on top of my hive. It's actually under the cover, so it's it's within the hive so the bees can get to it. But what a candy board is you take 2 cups of water to 1 5-pound bag of sugar. You're going to boil that to 253 roughly, using a hard candy thermometer, and then pour that into a frame that will hold that. Well, at that point, it's kind of like a really thick sugar syrup. Actually, not a syrup because it's not liquidy anymore. It's fairly thick, and then as that cools, it will harden, and then the bees are able to go. When you put that on the hive, the bees are able to lick the sugar water from that candy board.
If I can add, you can Google candy board, and you'll find a lot of recipes. Here in Illinois, Lincoln Land Beekeepers, they've posted that candy board recipe for not only cooking the sugar syrup, but some pictures to kind of show you what a candy board looks like. They're not hard to make. It's just a board cut the same dimensions as a hive body. But that's posted on the Lincoln Land Beekeepers site, I think on their downloads of document page. All you have to do is Google Lincoln Land Beekeepers. They should come up pretty much towards the top of your search results.
The best placement of a hive in an orchard?
The best place to place a hive is in full sun if you can. So if it's in an orchard, kind of face it on the south side or the east side or southeast. Whatever way is going to get the most sun. You don't want the hive to be in shade all day long, because I don't know what kind of an orchard you're referring to, but some of the commercial orchards I've seen, there's not much sunlight that reaches the ground once the trees are in bloom. Understand that bees, when they leave their hive, they're going to forage in a 3 to 5 mile radius. A 3-mile radius encompasses over 18,000 acres. A 5-mile radius encompasses over 25,000. You can place it maybe near the orchard. It doesn't have to be immediately near it or in it. Bees, for some reason, they have a tendency not to forage the food sources immediately outside of their hive. Scientists are still trying to understand that. They don't know if it's because when they visit the flowers, the bees leave a scent, so the bees don't continually revisit the same flower. So they're maybe not trying to give their hive location away or whatever, but I hope that answers your question. That they, as long as it's near the orchard, they're going to find it. And also, when bees are foraging, they're not going to jump from one type of flower to the next. You're not going to see a honeybee working an apple blossom and then going over to a cherry blossom and then working a peach blossom, or jumping from clover to dandelion. Honeybees, now you may have the same hive working different plant sources, but the bees that are on the dandelion blossoms or the bees that are on the clovers blossoms or what have you, that's all they're going to work all day long. So that's the reason you want to have plenty of flowers of one type.
Do bees tolerate extreme heat or cold? And the short answer to that is yes. Bees are kept all throughout the United States and in Canada. What you can do for extreme cold, if you feel that will be an issue, is you can put hives, not where the bees are going to fly out, but, excuse me, don't place it where the bees will fly out, but around the hive you could place straw bales as a windbreak barrier. But the reason that a bee will die more likely in the winter is lack of food.
Yes, the bee will die of lack of starvation. The bees are very good at regulating not only the temperature but the humidity of their hive, regardless of what the outside temperature is. During the summer, they will probably consume a lot of water, and that's for air conditioning. They will go and gather water at a water source. They'll go back to the hive, then they'll expel the water and fan their wings over it as a form of air conditioning to cool down the hive. Or you'll see bees oriented in one direction or the other to either draw air in or to draw air out during the summer. In the winter, the bees, no matter what the temperature is outside, it could be 10 degrees below outside, but in the cluster, the bees will keep that cluster 85 to 95 degrees in temperature. And that's why they need to consume a lot of food during the winter. They consume the honey, and they detach their flight muscles from their wings so that they can shiver, and that's what creates the heat, much like a human does. And that's how they survive the farther reaches of Canada and Alaska.
The next question is, I've heard of putting raw sugar on top of a hive. Will that work and be acceptable in place of a candy board? Let me first say that a candy board is one option for winter feeding. That's not the only option. Another form would be Krabby Patties, and that recipe can be found on the Illinois State Beekeepers website. And Steve's going to address the raw sugar.
Yes, I do not know what you mean by raw sugar, but raw sugar in and itself is toxic to bees. Believe it or not, the refined sugar, if that's what you're talking about. If you're talking about just regular refined table sugar, the white crystal stuff that you see and bake with, that is what we're saying you feed to the hives. Do not feed what we would call raw sugar to bees. It's toxic. It contains too many other chemicals and byproducts that will end up killing them, such as molasses and other chemicals. The third question, do you have to cook sugars for syrup? You don't have to, but it's recommended, because in cooking this, in boiling the water and then adding the sugar to it to dissolve the sugar, you're killing a lot of the natural airborne yeast and bacteria that's going to be in the air and the water that, if you leave alive, may cause that sugar syrup to mold quicker than it will. All sugar syrup is going to mold after a certain amount of time, and people that have hummingbird feeders know that the best thing to do for the health of the of the hummingbirds and for the life of the sugar syrup is to boil the water that you make your hummingbird syrup out of. Hopefully that answers the question there.
Again, you have on your handouts my email contact and phone number. If you have further questions that you'd want to direct my way, I can certainly field those questions. I appreciate you all for tuning in this evening. Again, hopefully this was a good brief introduction for you, and it hopes that you'll reach out to your local beekeeping organizations to learn some more about beekeeping. Kari, do you have anything to add?
Just thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and thank you, Jennifer, for being able to put a wonderful presentation together for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.